Hey everyone, it's Andrew Schiffman.
Harry Turcott here. We both worked at MTV in the music and talent department in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah, it was a time where music videos, TRL, The Jersey Shore, and the Osbournes ruled the airwaves.
Yes, Andrew, those are some great years. So tune in every week as we catch up with old MTV coworkers, record label execs, VJs, and artists.
I can't wait, Perry. We'll give you insights into meeting superstars before they were superstars and some juicy secrets from that golden age of MTV.
So grab your headphones and get ready to relive the era of music television and the people who shaped a generation.
Welcome to the Music Lounge, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Perry, how you doing?
I'm doing really well today, Andrew. How are you doing?
Good.
Hey, we hit a nice milestone this week.
Oh yeah, we did. We hit for us, we hit 500 streams of our podcasts.
That's great.
So, thank you, world. Thank you very much. But I'm excited today. This guy, not in common musically, haven't seen him in a long time, which is why I love doing these podcasts. So, and you worked with him a lot, Perry, right?
I did, yeah. We were on the MTV.com team prior to it actually becoming part of the channel music team. So we will jump right into it. Our guest today is Shawn Francis, who is the former manager of music programming and talent relations at MTV and MTV.com, and is currently the executive creative director at Civitas Marketing. Welcome, Shawn.
Hello, boys. How are you?
Welcome, Shawn. Good to see you.
Doing great.
I have to back up onto something because not only did I work with Perry, but Perry, you actually interviewed me. You and John Mascalzo.
I did. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So that was, it's not a funny story, but we posted the position and we had interviews, and in today's environment, you think there's so much competition for jobs, and the people that HR was sending us were so not right for the position. Like, we had someone come in, and this was when we were hiring for MTV.com, and our first question was, "So what do you think of the website?" And the person's like, "I've never been on it." We're like, "What? Well, how have you never gone on the website of the place you're trying to get a job?" So yes, we were very fortunate to have you come in. Did you come in through Courtney?
I did.
Yeah.
Courtney and I knew each other from back in college in Texas. She was the intern on the Sunday night indie alternative show, and the guy on our alternative station in Dallas. And he happened to live next door to me in college. So I met her through that, and then she moved to New York. And the funny thing about New York City is it's absolutely lousy with Texans. Like, there are people from Texas crawling all over New York. And we all tend to know each other. And so we were hanging out often. And when this role came up, I was working for Knitting Factory at the time for their label group, and kind of doing some things for the venue, doing something for the labels. And then I was doing I started writing a lot for them. It was kind of the era of Vice magazine was at the peak of its powers, and that sort of snarky humor there was something that everyone seemed to be gravitating towards. I started writing newsletters for Knitting Factory. They're like, "Oh, you read Vice? You can write this voice. Go do that." And I was like, "Okay, cool." And it kind of just allowed me to kind of pick up a bunch of different skills, from what I was doing for writing outgoing copy for shows at the venue to helping the booker find new bands. I think about this all the time, but we booked Block Party's first show in America, which was really funny. And I have a CDR that one of the guys literally put 4 songs on it, burned 4 songs, and wrote in marker their phone number and an email address and was like, here you go, and then sent it to me in the mail. Like it was,
Wow.
yeah,
Crazy, man.
yeah.
That
Fun
is
fact: I
great.
grew up in the same town, Essex, as
Ah,
the block party guys.
nice.
We didn't go to the
They,
same school, but a lot of my friends went to that school. So
well, there you
from the
go.
same town, one of my favorite bands, man. And seeing them live, where did I see them? I think I saw them at like maybe a Webster Hall or something like that. But incredible live.
Yeah, I saw them someplace in Harlem actually too. At whatever that big venue
United
is up in
Palace
Harlem.
Theater.
United Palace Theater. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So what you actually just described is a perfect lead into our first question here. So during the aughts, which Andrew will describe what that means. I'm
Yeah, I
kidding.
just found out. It's the zeros.
The zeros, the 2000s.
The
Yeah.
2000s.
So during that time, MTV was, kind of considered the mothership of the company, and for music and videos. And MTV.com had a bunch of other content like radio stations, blogs, ringtones, and was probably the leading music website at the time because of all the content we had. So talk about your time programming a lot of this content and how it helped to make online music more accessible and available.
Yeah, it was so fascinating, Perry, because when you said at that time, and probably still to this day, when you said MTV, people think of the music video as the core product, the linear turning on TV and seeing that video. But there was so much more going on. This was also this point where, okay, we had just figured out how to code videos into the website, right? And it would take God knows how long it would take those guys to put that stuff in there back then. But it was sort of trying to teach labels and teach artists and teach viewers that MTV was more than that one thing. So it was like, okay, the label comes in and they're like, hey, we got this new video by whoever, and you're like, okay, no, it's not going to go to rotation, but we can show it online and premiere it online, and you kind of had to educate them of the value of that. Um, so I was, working with Courtney and a couple other people, like coming up with concepts of like things like making the videos or sort of those things. But we were also programming online radio stations and creating different themed stations. So you'd have things like, yes, there's a hip hop station, there's a metal station, et cetera. But then we were making stations for specific shows, like a Subterranean show, which would be all the alt things. And then we kind of, as sort of the reality show of it all started coming around, you start realizing, okay, the Hills is doing great numbers. Let's do like a Hills playlist or Hills radio, things like that, that were a little bit more themed beyond the genre. One of the funny things from that era I think of is the ringtone thing, which you mentioned. MTV had this deal with this other company, and it was basically like, hey, we've got the ringtones and the publishing. You guys have the airtime and the audience. Why don't we do these lists of ringtones? We'll sell the ringtones during TRL, and that's what I would do. I would make every week we would come up with a new list of like, here's the top 10 ringtones, and they would show these little promos during TRL, and they would presumably sell a billion of them. But they were, you think about it now, it's like people were paying $3.99 for a 16-bit ringtone that barely sounded like their
Right, right,
song.
right. Well, and the funny thing too, that was all during the time of declining CD sales, and the record labels were actually like, ringtones are going to save our business, and yeah,
I mean, they had a probably 3-year period where they made a bunch of money, like a
they
ridiculous
did.
amount of money.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It seems quaint now because it's like, oh, if I wanted that song to be on a ringtone, I would just pull it out of my iTunes. But yeah, it was also it was a weird era because it was kind of this era where there were all these new things. When blogs were coming into it, and like, that was something I really was fascinated with and really actively participated in because, a label would give you a free MP3 to go post, and then that would just take off like wildfire. There's so many bands like Block Party that we were mentioning is a great example of like that blog rock era, right?
Yeah.
Where you would give away 3 MP3s on a couple of blogs over 6 months, and suddenly you were selling out Irving Plaza. Like it would
Yeah.
just catch fire. That stuff was super interesting. And then one of the reasons I got brought in when go back to being hired is Urge, the short-lived MTV music service. you know. And again, it was just this era where the company was trying a bunch of different things, to sort of capture a market that I think the demographic was changing so much, right?
They
It
were on the
was
right track with those solutions. They're just a little bit too early, like 5 years too early. With the Hills, did you ever get the cast to curate their own playlist, or were you just picking songs from the show?
a bit of both. A bit of
For
both. We were
both,
always asking, and that would be part of like the ask at the beginning of a season. If you knew that Jersey Shore was coming back and they were doing sort of the press junkety things and coming in doing promo, that
yeah.
was one of the things we would always put down on the list. And half the time people were like, it was such a new concept. Really, people did. What do you mean a streaming music service? Like no one really got it at that point. You have to understand this is an era where this is right when the iPhone is coming out. You know, I have made my I've made my career most of the last 15 years, 16 years since I left MTV has been working in social media. And I actually did MTV's first social media activation. This was around I want to say the '06 or '07 VMAs, the ones in
It was
Vegas.
'07. Because I worked on that one also.
Yeah, I think everyone who worked
Yeah.
on it has the scars from being in Vegas for a week. Some people were there even 2 weeks. Oh my gosh. But the funny thing about that was MTV's first social activation was Twitter. The backstory I can tell you: John Scalzo calls me into his office when he says, "Come in the office. Got something for you." I'm like, "Okay." Come down the hall and I go in there. Michael Scoggin, who ran the mobile department, because there was a mobile department back then, because ringtones were that big of a deal. Says, "Hey, you're going to go to Vegas to VMAs." I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool. Am I doing talent escorting? What am I doing?" He's like, "No, you're going to tweet." I'm like, "Okay, cool. What does that mean?" Because I was like, "What is it?" He says, "This thing called Twitter." I'm like, "Okay." And he's like, "You're basically sending text messages to no one but everyone at the same time." And I'm like, "Okay." Again, this is '06. The VMAs were in August. The iPhone didn't come out till September. So there wasn't even an app yet for Twitter. It was just
No,
something
there was no
you
app. It was just a texting platform. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. You would send text to this short code, and we had
Yep.
built a little module on MTV.com in the right rail so that all the text or tweets would appear there during the show. And I basically went to Vegas for a week with this weird quasi BlackBerry phone that had a keyboard, because again, there wasn't even an iPhone yet. And I would just go to all the parties, go to all the events, and just tell people what was going on. It would appear on the right rail, and it was one of those things where I kind of backed into it by accident, but it ended up kind of setting me up for the next 15 years of my career, because that's kind of where I've been, is in the social world.
So the only place to view that was really tuning into MTV and seeing the tweets on the side of the screen. Did you
Yeah.
ever go up to artists and get quotes, or was it just from your kind of perspective as the Twitter
It was
moderator,
all,
if you like?
yeah, it was just all my POV. I mean, this was the Wild West
Right.
era. I mean, this was the absolute dawn of social media. There was no blueprint for it. It was literally just being fly on the wall. But what a great VMAs to be a fly on the wall. Because like for those listening who don't recall that VMA, it was in the Palms Hotel in
Yeah.
Vegas, and there was the main show in the Pearl Amphitheater. But then you had these, I think, 4 or 5 like really elaborate suites that different artists were curating. And there was like, my personal favorite was like there was this like rock and roll debauchery suite with that the Foo Fighters had, and it was like Foo Fighters, Queens of the Stone Age, and all these, just the rock bands were there, and they had equipment set up in the corner, and they would get up and just do songs, and it would just be weird because like different people would just come in and out. And like at one point, CeeLo Green from Goody Mob gets up and starts singing Prince's Darling Nikki with the Foo Fighters as his backing band. It was just like these weird, like, what is going on right now? But it was cool. And I was just like telling people this, and it was like popping up on the screen, and it will pop up on the homepage. It's one of those things that I wish I could go back and look at it now
Yeah.
and see what the reaction was like.
Well, the cool part of it too is that I mean, I would hazard a guess that those things don't happen today. Everything is much more monitored. Everything is much more controlled because there are cameras everywhere. There are people with phones everywhere. A lot of these things you had access to, and you had an opportunity to sort of be at because people weren't so concerned that everybody was going to be like reporting on it or seeing it or whatever it was.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if it's 2024 and someone comes into a production meeting with that as an idea of, hey, this is what we should do at the VMAs, it doesn't get past square one. It
Yeah.
absolutely doesn't. And it's funny, I saw things, and luckily I was adult enough to use my good judgment. And there's a lot of things I saw that I did not put out into the world, but that was an interesting one. One moment that I didn't do anything with was, that was the VMAs where Britney Spears kind of had that performance that was kind of like, I don't want to say the beginning of the end, but kind of, her career went in a different path after that performance. And I remember coming out of a door, side stage, and kind of coming out into a corridor, and Peter Barron and someone from Britney's label and someone from her management are just like jawing in the hallway. Like, it's clearly very tense. And I hear someone from the label or management was just like, this is a disaster. This is a disaster. Like, and I was like, oh, I don't know what's going on here, but let me just walk away and definitely not record this for posterity.
With
Yeah.
the Twitter stuff, how did you measure the success if it was really just a one-way viewing?
There was no,
There
there was
wasn't
no
any.
thinking. There was no measuring success. I mean, again, it was such a
Yeah.
new thing. If you think about it back, I mean, again, it was text messages. There was no KPIs.
Right.
There was no way to get any sort of measurement of how many people
Yeah.
saw it or anything. It was just about being first and being new and different, which I think was the real spirit of MTV, right?
There was
Is
nothing
always
negative about it, so there you go.
about,
Right?
yeah.
So, and that was also the VMAs, and I think I've mentioned this before, where we did get a couple of artists to also tweet from the VMAs, and I remember we had Plain White Tees and I had Soldier Boy, and I think there was one
Yeah.
or two more. I don't know if you remember who else, but I had to literally send them phones that was already set up so that they didn't have to do anything, and just ask them to send these text messages during the weekend while they were there. And I would say 90% of the labels were like, A, I don't know what this is. And B, I'm not having my artists put out any information about themselves at an event because we don't want stalkers.
That was actually, I have to say, it was like, look, I mean, no one needs to be in Vegas for a week. And I know some people on the talent team were there for 2 weeks. No one needs to be in Vegas that long. Having said that, it was so unique to just walk around that casino in the days leading up to the event, because you would just walk past the table and there's Chester Bennington playing cards, and you look across, like, oh, there's a guy from Linkin Park playing cards. And I looked over, looking across the table, and he's playing cards with Timberland, and it was just like these weird, bizarre things of everyone was just kind of, it seemed like everyone kind of had their guard down in a way that if you were at a traditional award show, it wouldn't happen. I mean, I have so many stories from that
It's
particular
Vegas, baby.
I
Vegas.
literally, but I drank no water and drank a lot of everything else, and I literally drove myself from the airport to the hospital when I landed back in Newark because I was so
Oh my God.
dehydrated. I was just, but what a time! What a fun event, never to be repeated.
Also, talking about music blogs that we mentioned previously, Subterranean and Buzzworthy were both channel
Yeah.
initiatives. One was a show, and one was sort of a new artist promotion. But they also had their own blogs on MTV.com. Talk about some of the artists and celebs that maybe got some of their first exposure on those blogs.
The one that, I don't know if it's necessarily her first exposure. I think we all know what that is, but I remember I interviewed Kim Kardashian for Buzzworthy when it was the press junket for the first season of Keeping Up with the Kardashians. And it was really funny because no one had warned me about it. No one had told me anything. Like, literally someone had come up to my desk like 2 hours before. I was like, hey, Kim Kardashian, can you interview her? And I'm like, the girl from the thing, the video. Yeah, okay, cool. So I was just like putting some questions together, and I remember asking her very specifically, like, "Do you have any plans to go into music? Is that something you ever saw yourself doing?" And she was a very good sport about it, but like her PR person was very like, "We're here to talk about the show, not anything else." She was very much trying to keep it on track, and I think, look, at that point in time, like Kim was not the you know just amazing businesswoman and star in her own right that she is right now. And she was coming off of the Ray J tape, so I think the PR person was probably right to be a little bit of a pit bull around her. But it's very funny to look back on it now, and I'll be on. Look, Kim Kardashian is a beautiful, beautiful woman, and I'm sitting on a couch next to her. I don't get starstruck, but I'm sitting on a couch next to her interviewing her, and she's just smiling with these big, beautiful eyes and looking at me the whole time. And I'm like, I think I had a shit eating grin on my face for like 6 hours afterwards. I was just like, what am I doing here?
Here's the thing about her, though, is I saw her once in the TRL hallway. She was with Paris,
Hmm.
because when they were friendly. She's so much smaller in person than you would expect her to be. Like,
Yes.
she was kinda tiny when I saw her. I just was so surprised about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I'm not a tall guy, and I'm like, oh, you are a little petite little thing at the time. But yeah, that was interesting. But then we did a lot of The cool thing was like there were a lot of bands that like those two blogs in particular. We were able to kind of, I don't want to say break, but definitely introduce them to the MTV ecosystem because again, in that era, everyone was like, just play our video on air. And it's like, no, we've got all these other things. But, I remember, and I can't take credit for this. I'll throw this Courtney Smith's way, but like Vampire Weekend, you know, Courtney really being like the first person to put that band on in any way, shape or fashion. We put them on that blog and, those guys, a lot of these sort of indie sleaze bands. I think one of the things I really remember fondly about my time at MTV and will always cherish is like I was so lucky to be in New York City working with indie labels and indie bands in that era when like New York was the epicenter of rock and roll. You know what I mean? The era of the Strokes, Yeah, Yeahs, TV on the radio, Vampire Weekend, all of these bands. And by the way, they were drinking in the same bars that we were. I was 25 years old going out the Lower East Side, just being, a dirty, dirty stay out. And those guys were in the same bars with me. It was so cool to be like there and a witness to a scene.
So, I'm gonna ask to put a pause on the rest of that story. We're gonna do a quick fire with you right now, and then we'll hear the stories from that time.
We, break halfway through our show and throw some quick fire questions to you. So,
All right, let's go.
First question: Oasis or Blur?
Oasis.
Beavis Butthead or Celebrity Deathmatch?
Give us some Butthead.
All right, 80s alt or 90s alt?
Oh, 80s alt. Much, much better haircuts.
Arctic Monkeys or The Strokes?
I'm going to lose my American passport for this one. Arctic Monkeys.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. So, in the early aughts, was an era of going to New York's downtown. It had a really big indie rock scene. And your role as being the rep for handling the indie artist relations, did you have any experiences with artists that you wanted to meet? Did you ask them to interviews?
Yeah, I mean, you would see everybody out there. I mean, that was the thing. It was like, what's the enemy? News Express used to call it the scene that celebrates itself, right? And it was this weird thing. Everybody was kind of in the mix. The label people, the management, the bands. We're all hanging out, drinking at the same bars in Williamsburg, Lower East Side, and East Village, etc. The funny thing was, though, it was like everybody was. There was such a affectation of cool that you would almost be too cool to, you wouldn't act like you knew who someone was, even though you sat there talking to them for like 45 minutes. And then like, oh yeah, I know your band, whatever, you try to play it off a bit, but yeah, everybody was around, everybody was around. And, again, you would go out and you'd see, oh, there's the Strokes there. There's Yeahs there at that bar. We used to go to, there used to be a party called Tiz Was down at Don Hills downtown. And it was a Saturday night, like indie dance party. And like clockwork, every week you would see Carlos D from Interpol. And Carlos was very funny because, he's in his role all the time. He's always in a suit, suspenders, hair is, immaculate. Everyone's dancing in the room. He's sitting there smoking a cigarette back when you could smoke in the bar. And he would get up and dance to one song and one song only. And you would hear the bass line from Joy Division's Transmission. And he would stand up, take his coat off, fold it over the chair in front of him, go on the dance floor and just do his crazy new wave dance, pick his jacket up, put it on, and leave. It was like he specifically waited to hear the one song.
He was waiting for that song, dance and leave, right?
Oh, yeah, he would just wait and go. It was very funny, but it was so cool because there were certain people that were, you would just see everyone out, but then there were some people that were like a kind of a joke about it, like James Iha from Smashing Pumpkins, who I adore Smashing Pumpkins. James Iha in that era, for whatever reason, was like Mr. Man About Town. And it was kind of a little bit of a joke, like it wasn't a party until James Iha showed up. I don't know if you remember this when our coworker Courtney Smith, she had a birthday party at Midway one year. After work, we all got for drinks at Midway. We're there about 2 hours. And I'm getting ready to leave. And I go up to Courtney and I say, I'm getting ready to go. Did you have a great time? She's like, so fun. She's like, everybody showed up. It was great. And I jokingly say, everybody except James Iha. And we laugh. Guys, 60 seconds pass. Who darkens the doorway but James Iha? He walks in. She sees him. I see her. We both break out laughing hysterically. He thinks we're laughing at him. He turns tail and just walks right out the door. And then the other piece of it is being where we worked and the roles we had, we were always getting invited out to things by the labels, all the shows and meet and greets, or sometimes just to go have drinks. There was a really funny one once when Arctic Monkeys were had finally graduated from the sort of smaller rooms of the Mercury Lounges and the Irving Plazas, and they were playing Hammerstein Ballroom, good size, 4,000 capacity room. And someone at the label gave me tickets. So I was like, yeah, I'll go. And I brought a friend. And, we got good tickets. We work at MTV. We got good tickets. And we had actually box seats on the side of the stage because it's like kind of an old theater building. And I can't remember who the opening band was. It was like the Zootoms or, one of the other also rans of that era. And we're in this box, and the box probably holds 8 people. And we're in there by ourselves. Like, we might have this to ourselves. And probably about 3 songs into their set, there's kind of like someone darkening the doorway, and it's like 3 guys and 3 girls, and kind of look up and they're like scruffy, and I'm like, wait, that's the Strokes. And it was Julian Casablancas, Nick Valenci, and Albert Hammond come in with their model girlfriends. I think one of them was dating the British TV presenter Amanda de Cadenet at the time. She was
wow.
I remember her.
in there with it. Yeah. So we're watching this Arctic Monkeys show with like 3 guys from the Strokes, and it was just this moment where, I grew up in Amarillo, Texas, middle of nowhere. Like I was the kid who just like wanted to get out of there, always wanted to do something music. MTV was a huge part of my youth. Every summer was just sitting on the couch, waiting for my video to come on, whatever it might be at that time. So it was, for me, that was a moment. I'm like, wow, I've arrived. I'm really doing this. It was really cool.
You were a little bit starstruck, right? From like working at MTV, seeing celebrities every day in the hallways, going out at night, seeing them in a different form. Gives you that kind of starstruck moment, or
it's maybe not a starstruck moment, but definitely a moment of like, I don't know, I felt a sense of pride. Like, it was one of those things where it was just like, I come from dirt. I come from a long line of janitors and maids. I was the first person in my family to graduate college. Everyone still lived back home. No one went to the big city. My grandma, literally, I moved to New York. My grandma would call me every night. Like she thought I was going to die. But it was just kind of these moments where I was like, oh, okay, this is cool. I'm actually like doing what I set out to do, which was get in the industry and actually do something. I think like a lot of young American kids, I wanted to be a rock star, but figured out very quickly I'm not a good musician. But I have other things that I can do that will allow me to play in the space of the music industry.
That has the as you just described, it's one of those pinch me moments. Like, is this
Yeah,
really my life right now? I used to have them
yeah,
all the time when I was there. I mean, it just kind of was like, e- but, and we've talked about this before, the pace of it, especially at work, is so quick that you're kind of like, you don't have time to really sort of process it. You kind of go, it's not till a few years later, you're like, wow, in a course of a day, I was with this artist and this artist and this artist, and I saw this show and I had dinner with these people, and you're kind of like, it just happened every day. So that was your life, but you didn't really understand how amazing it was at the
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think of this show's namesake, the actual music lounge. The people that I sat in this, it's not that big of a room, right? It was probably a 12 by 30 room, but the people I sat in there with, it just got sometimes I'm like, man, that's crazy. I remember Jay-Z when he was VP of A&R at, was it Island or Interscope? I can't remember which label it was at the time. It was crazy enough that Jay would come in, and I love it when Jay-Z comes in because he doesn't come in as Jay-Z, he comes as a Shawn Carter. He comes in, he's understated, he's got like a nice sweater and some slacks, but he's got a watch on that's more than you make in a year. But he's much more much more understated. But I remember him coming in and bringing in, he's like, oh, that's my new artist. Her name's Rihanna, and like Rihanna's sitting there. I can see her. I can see her in the room, like sitting there. She's to the left of the big screen, sitting on like a little box. She's got a yellow turtleneck on and some jeans and some Timberlands and a wig that's maybe not the best wig ever. And she's super quiet. I got the impression she was maybe a little self-conscious about her accent, and she was like 19 years old. She was just like this
Yeah.
19-year-old girl. And it's like, this was not the fully formed diva, globe straddling icon that we know now.
Yeah, that I talk about that meeting a lot also because the thought that not only was there one major superstar in the room, but there was one soon to be major superstar in the room too. And it
Yeah.
was, just having that opportunity was just
Yeah.
incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. You know who I think was the
Yeah.
coolest? And the other one that I met really young, well, we probably all did, I should say. Adele. I remember Adele coming in promoting. The first record wasn't even out yet. Like Rolling in the Deep was the only single out. And she was like 19 years old. She was just like this kid, and it was very funny because she just had no, and Adele still has no pretense, right? That's what's so great about her. She's so genuine. But she came in and was just like, all right, you're all right, just total East End street urchin, and it was great. And I think about it now, it's like this woman is like, you know, she she could play a stadium if she wants to, but she doesn't have to. She's great. You know what I mean? Like she's just
Yeah.
this thing.
MTV.com was probably one of the few places to see music videos, especially, you know, people would watch them on TRL, they'd go to MTV.com, they'd watch the videos again. Um, but in around 2006, YouTube started, and
Mm,
you could kind of upload anything you wanted there. Most of them was like dog and cat and baby videos, I believe, or someone, getting hit in the groin with something. So, um, but it soon became a music destination because there was no gatekeeper like an MTV to kind of screen or program the videos. Um, what are your thoughts on YouTube sort of becoming competition for MTV and MTV.com?
yeah, I can tell I remember the day sitting there in that open pit on the 8th floor. And Aurora Hernandez was like, "Oh, did you see this thing?" And I'm like, "What?" She's like, "It's this thing called YouTube, and like you can host videos on it, and you can just literally just copy and paste the code and put it into your blog." And at this time, we had like Daniel Kraft and Matt Anderson and a couple other people who were like hand coding videos into the website that was probably taking them forever to do. And they both just kind of look at me like, wait, what? I can just copy and paste this thing, you know? But in some weird way, it was like some were like, oh, that's cool. But in my head, it was one of the three horsemen of the apocalypse that kind of started the sort of slide of maybe relevance that MTV had. But, you know, the fact that, again, like I alluded to earlier, I used to sit on the couch all summer long waiting to see whatever video I wanted. And then once people started uploading their music videos there, it was kind of this thing of like, oh, wait, we don't have to sit around and watch MTV. We can just go on YouTube and see everything, you know? And for whatever reason, people sort of sidestepped MTV.com to go for their videos and went to YouTube for them. And, you know, for better or for worse, it is what it is. But it was like, it was one of those things where it was just like a little bit of a harbinger of things to come, you know, in the fact that YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and I would have to, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't bring up MySpace in that era, right? Because
Yep.
MySpace was definitely peeling off a lot of the attention that traditionally would have gone to an MTV. You know, these bands' MySpace pages, I think, was the first, that was the opening salvo of, I think, of bands recognizing the fact that, hey, we don't have to rely on radio or MTV to tell our story for us. We can have our own place and reach our fans directly.
Yeah. So, I don't know if you remember a band called Tokyo Hotel
Yes.
they were huge. I mean, they were huge with that a very specific audience, and I think a
Yeah.
lot of that
They were from
came
Germany,
from
right?
yeah, and a lot of that came from I think their MySpace fans. I was doing a little research recently on VMAs, and in 2008 VMAs, the nominees for Best New Artist were uh, Miley Cyrus, Taylor Swift, Katy Perry, and Tokyo Hotel. And Tokyo Hotel
Wow.
won Best New Artist. Yeah, isn't that crazy?
That's bizarre. Those guys, if I was one of those guys, I would be telling that story daily. Like
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely daily.
But I think anytime we posted anything about it, I remember Tamar would post stuff on Buzzworthy about it, and it would go through the roof. It would be like the most viewed Buzzworthy story, have the most comments. It was, you know, amazing. But I think a lot of that because their MySpace fans were so active and and
Yeah.
and uh, and so supportive of them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's the power
I
of
and
think that
community.
was when I first got to the music team in like 2005. I took over 120 minutes from
And I was
Lindsay,
so
I think.
jealous. And I was so
And
jealous.
yeah, that was one of my biggest highlights. We, you know, sitting with Matt in my office, programming the music, picking what we wanted. It was cool.
I
Being on a
mean,
few sets with Kasabian, and I
oh
got
man.
to do Oasis as well, which was cool.
Oh
Separately,
wow. I just got tickets
separately,
yesterday. Don't
brother.
mean to brag, but I just got tickets yesterday.
I will see you there,
Yes, sir.
and I'm gonna see them in London as well.
Oh man, you're double dipping.
I
That's
had to
amazing.
do that.
Would they? Would,
But
would they, let me ask you a question. Would they be your like your number one moment of band you got to work, artist you got to work with?
at MTV, yeah, probably.
Mm.
That and Kasabian at the time, but Tom didn't show up for the interview. It was Serge,
Surge?
which is still cool, you know, because he's now the front
Yeah,
man
yeah.
of Kasabian. But yeah, like I remember for Oasis, it was Liam. We went to a guitar shop and did the taping there. And I don't know how this happened, but you know, there was some downtime, and I was sitting in front of the camera. I think I was posing as Matt for the you know, camera angle and the lighting and stuff. And we were talking about marathon training because at the time I was training for New York Marathon. And I don't know how we got onto that, but I just kind of wanted to have a cool chat with him, not about music. I just wanted it to be normal, like we were sitting in a pub, you know, talking.
Yeah.
So I probably could have picked a better conversation, but yeah, it's not like I'm gonna go backstage at the show and he'll be like, Andrew from New York, I remember.
Yeah,
But yeah, that
those are
was.
the cool
But
moments, though,
we've
right?
all
When
we've
you
all had good moments. We like to ask our guests what their favorite New York City venue was. And a lot of people, I'm going to kind of set it up that, and me kind of personally, it's not the venue, it's the show, it's the artist and the experience that someone's seen, unless you tell me differently. So do you have a favorite venue, or is it more of a show?
Oh, there's so many babies. I was
So
definitely
many.
one of those. I love live music, and I was always. I just love being going to shows. I still do. My friends laugh at me now. They're like, "You're 48 and you're still going to punk shows in church basements." And I'm like, every once in a while, yeah. I love that feeling. So it's hard for me to choose. But it's probably when I think, especially when I think of that era, it's got to be Bowery Ballroom. Bowery Ballroom was just like this. There was a bit of a it was a ritual, right? Like, especially in this sort of indie sleaze blog rock era where, this band who's got two songs anyone has heard, but they've got enough momentum around them that they're suddenly selling out this 750 capacity room. And it was kind of like this rite of passage for a band to play there. There seemed like there was very much a ladder at the time, especially for like indie bands, where it was like you come to New York and you play Mercury Lounge, you sell that out, you go to Bowery Ballroom, you sell out Bowery Ballroom. That's where the fork in the road is. It's like how much demand was there? Because if there was a hell of a lot of demand, you're going straight to Webster Hall from Bowery Ballroom, but you might go to Irving Plaza in between. But there was definitely like a ladder. But Bowery Ballroom is when you caught people right at that moment where it was like, this is the last chance I'm going to see this band before I have to see them in a 5,000 capacity room.
So
And
any bands that stick out from the Bowery?
Yeah. I remember seeing The Rapture and LCD Sound System.
Wow.
Ironic thing is, LCD Sound System were the openers of The Rapture.
Wow.
And it was the first time I'd ever seen them. I think they only had Losing My Edge 12-inch single out. They really didn't have anything out there. And they wiped the floor with The Rapture. The Rapture were great band, but they wiped the floor. They were incredible. I remember seeing I love a lot. Andrew and I, we used to talk about all the Brit rock bands we used to like, but I used to go see all the bands that never came to Texas. So like the Charlatans UK and things like that, all of those type of bands. I'll tell you my most memorable show in there was quite the opposite. It was an underplay. It was Depeche Mode played in Bowery Ballroom. And that's my favorite band of all time since I'm like 8 years old. That was like my band. And um, how I got in there was so crazy because it was a promotional thing, fan club thing only they'd done with JR Music World. If you remember that record store downtown, you had to buy the album there and enter some contest. But one of the guys who worked on Urge, this guy Brian, who programmed all the dance music from Urge, someone called him up and said, "Hey, do you want to DJ before Depeche Mode goes on at Bowery Ballroom?" And he was like, yes. I happened to be, by sheer luck and happenstance, happened to be in his office when the call came in, and he was just like so excited. And I jumped on the opportunity before I could say anything. I was like, "Can I carry your records?" And he's like, "Yeah, dude, absolutely, absolutely." Before he had a chance to say no. So we go, and as you can imagine, Depeche Mode comes to New York. They played 3 nights at the Garden, so them in Bowery Ballroom was crazy. It was the closest I knew I would ever get to seeing them. The ironic thing about it, though, it's probably, and I say this not to brag, I say this because I have a sickness. I've literally seen every tour this band has done since 1990, with the exception of one. And most of those tours I've gone multiple nights. So I've seen them probably 15 to 20 times. Having said that, this is probably my least favorite show of theirs.
Really?
Because, you know what? There's certain bands you want to see up close and personal, but certain bands you want all the pomp and circumstance. You want the lights, the video projections, the big stage. You want all of that. They're one of those bands, and it was really cool to get up close and personal. But at the same time, like, I'd actually prefer to see them in the Garden with all of the accoutrement that goes with them. But that venue is just again. There's no better place for like getting up close and personal, but still having like enough people that there's a vibe.
Every time we ask this question, a new experience comes into my mind, and right now It's the XX at Mercury Lounge. I think
Ooh.
must have been one of their first shows. And that's a venue where you're literally up close and personal.
Yeah.
But their sound is so trippy, but it was such a hypnotic show. And yeah, I had some drinks and my physical state was very like just blast me with the music. And but that was a very, very cool that was a
Yeah.
very cool experience. And their
That's a-
experiences, they're not just seeing a show at a venue. To us, those are experiences,
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, that's another great venue too. Again, saw a lot of small people there. The funny, this is pretty
If you're
MTV,
at the
but
back
tied.
of the room, it sucks.
Yeah, yeah.
You
Yeah.
might as well
The
leave.
stage is so low. The stage was
Yeah.
way too low. Yeah. Brandon Schmidt. So he managed Interpol. And right before I started working at MTV, I was working at Knitting Factory, and I did some A&R for them. And Interpol hadn't been signed yet. And Courtney Smith kept telling me, hey, you got to come see Brandon's band that he's managing, this band called Interpol. They're really cool. She invited me like 3 shows. I never went. Finally, the 4th show, I'm like, okay, I'll go. They're playing Mercury Lounge. Oh, so they're getting a little traction. I go. 2, 3 songs in, run into an old friend from Texas who I hadn't seen in years. He's like, let's go get a beer. I'm like, yeah, let's go here. So we go back to the bar, and it's kind of a separate room. And I end up not watching any of the show. I end up drinking beer with this guy, whatever. And the Courtney's like, Brendan and Courtney come up like, oh, what'd you think of the band? I'm like, yeah, it's all right, whatever. And that was that. Fast forward like a year and a half later, they're like the biggest thing. And I'm telling my boss, and he's like, oh man, this band Interpol. And I'm like, oh, we could have signed them, Peter. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, this friend brought me the show. I didn't pay attention, whatever. Like, we totally could have signed them. He's like, cheer up. Don't worry about it, kid. And this is my old boss, a guy named Peter Wright. And he's like, everybody who's done A&R has one that got away. He's like, mine is Smashing Pumpkins.
Wow.
He's like, my best friend is Joe. His best friend is Joe Shanahan, who owns the Cabaret Metro in Chicago, legendary venue. He said the same thing. He said, Joe Shanahan for years was telling me, you got to come check these guys out, Smashing Pumpkins. He's like, I just didn't get it. He's like, I went and saw them. I just flat out didn't get it. And he's like, if I would have got it, I wouldn't have a job right now. I would be set for life. So
Yeah,
I saw Interpol at Radio City Music Hall, and that's a venue where we've hosted the VMAs there. I saw the Rockettes there, and to see a band like that was just incredible. A very cool theater.
My Interpol experience is Mercury Lounge, Bowery Ballroom, Roseland.
Okay.
And then Radio City. So
rest in peace,
seeing
Roseland.
them all of those venues, yeah.
On their career growth.
You got to watch the trajectory, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And every show was great.
Wait, you brought up Lindsay earlier, who used to run 120 Minutes. She and I went to one of the last, I think it was probably one of the last shows I went to under the MTV umbrella when Daft Punk played at the baseball stadium on Coney Island. The Pyramid Tour. Lindsay and I went to that, and it was that's not one of my unforgettable venues, but it hands down one of the most unforgettable shows. I mean, just absolutely insane. And Lindsay and I, last time I talked to her, we were reminiscing about it. We were joking. I was like, even the cops were dancing. Because there was a little point we looked over, and we were in like one of the little suite things, and it's a minor league baseball stadium, so it's not like some elaborate thing, but we're out on the little balcony of the suite thing. And there was like a police sort of, bird's eye view thing they were kind of, looking at. And we look over at one point, and the cop in full uniform just going for it, just absolutely going for it, But it was such a cool show, and that was interesting because for a lot of reasons, because that tour, that was when Daft Punk did the Pyramid tour, And at the time, like no one at that point, electronic music DJs just got up and played with records, and that was that. Every once in a while, there was someone like the Prodigy or Chemical Brothers who brought out an entire studio's worth of gear on stage, but it was pretty much just 2 guys doing this, like that thing with the lights and the sound that they brought out. I think a lot of people think the same way, but that tour and that show, that particular production, set the stage for what was to come with EDM and the way we go to festivals now, what you see at a Coachella or a EDC, right? These big electronic music festivals. Like, no one had done that until Daft Punk did that. And then in true contrarian Daft Punk way, they're like, okay, now we're never doing that again because everyone
right.
does it.
Exactly.
I think prior to that was probably Fatboy Slim and bands like that that really knew how to play to a sea of people and have a party with just the DJ,
Yeah. They brought a level of production that we hadn't seen in dance music.
But yeah, man, good catching up with you. I have a lot more experiences with venues, but I'm going to save them for next week.
No, this was great, man. This was great. It's nice to revisit because I had the time of my life, like if you're a music head and you got to work at MTV in that era, like what a gift. What a gift,
Yeah. And any genre, hip hop, pop, boy bands, indie, we covered it all, And, to work there, you could be passionate about anything and just have that perfect gig.
Yeah, it was great. And it was one of those things that, it was fun while it lasted.
Yeah.
You could, it was fun while it lasted. But we also there, I think the era we were there in those early aughts eras, we were also witnesses to the beginning of the change, right? Because we were there
getting to the end. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like suddenly it was like people were downloading music and streaming music, so the record labels weren't making as much money, so they didn't have as much money for promo. We noticed that, you had, when we were there was that 1, 2, 3 punch of the Hills, Laguna Beach, and Jersey Shore that were just all huge hits in reality, and sure ad sales was looking around going, right, we can get like 4 times the money selling ads against this stuff than music videos. And then you add that third thing to it, which we talked about a little bit, the coming of YouTube, where YouTube just came in and flipped the table, right? They changed the paradigm of like, you don't have to wait around to see this music video. You can come here right now and see it. So I think all 3 of those things at the same time in a very short span of time kind of created this perfect storm for the channel to kind of have to try and reinvent itself and try and find a new way to survive. And it seemed like reality TV was the thing for a while.
Yeah, well, we've talked about this in previous episodes where we still found a way to expose music and support new artists. We mentioned the 52 bands promotion. We had the credit squeezes. We tried to air 90-second video music blocks. So we had to be creative,
I also think at one point, weren't they running music syncs in shows too?
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think that all spun off the back of I can't remember if it was Laguna Beach or the Hills, but one of them had that scene where those ladies were in the back of a limo at the end of some episode and they were all singing Journey, Don't Stop Believing. You remember that? And then literally the next week in the iTunes chart, Journey's Don't Stop Believing went from being, number 240,000 to number 3. It was the number 3 downloaded song on iTunes the next week. And I think Joe Cuello's group out there in LA that was dealing with a lot of the music supervision task for the company were kind of like, hang on, we got something here,
Yeah.
Jordan Glickson, we had the same conversation where he was literally booking his new bands within the Hills, right, Perry?
Yes. Yeah.
So lots of opportunities, and we were the first company to probably do that kind of creative syncing and exposure for music in non-music programming.
Yeah, it just speaks to, I think, at the end of the day, that's that spirit of sort of innovation, doing what hasn't been done before, all in service of getting music to kids, is like that's how MTV became what it was,
Absolutely. And just to sort of put a cap on all this, I really do feel that was the last era that MTV was able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And we were lucky to be part of it.
Shawn, good to see you, my friend.
Lovely stuff, guys. All the best. I will be listening.
Let's go see a show and grab a beer.
Done. Absolutely. Both of you. Let's do it.
Thank you, Shawn. Appreciate it. Don't be a stranger.
Will not. Oh, now you're going to have to
All
deal
right.
with me. Take
All
care.
right. Talk soon.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you. We'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us today in the Music Lounge.
And tune in next week to hear more stories about your favorite era of MTV.